Artificial Frontier Podcast.
Okay, so we've gotten a lot of requests from listeners about pet cloning.
Mm.
And it's understandable.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that's like, whoa.
Right.
Like, we think about science fiction, we think about,
Yeah.
clones and stuff.
Exactly.
But this is, like, actually happening.
Yeah, it's happening right now.
Yeah.
Like, it's here. It's not. It's not science fiction.
Science fiction. It's
Yeah.
real life.
Yeah. So let's, dive in.
Okay.
And I know you've got, a ton of research here.
I've got actually stacks and stacks of research on pet cloning.
Wow.
And it's because it's such a fascinating topic.
Right.
That sort of sits at the intersection of,
It feels very,
science and ethics and personal experience.
It's like the heart and the head. And
exactly. And it really is. So how do we even begin? Well, I think maybe the best place to start is with, the why.
Why are people choosing to do this? Why are people choosing to clone their pets?
Okay, so, what's the motivation?
Yeah, what's the motivation?
Is it grief? Is it,
Just sort of.
desire for immortality? What is it?
I think grief is a big part of it.
Yeah.
And actually, we have a really
Right.
poignant example of that.
You can't talk about this without talking about
Of sheep.
Right.
Dolly's sheep, right. So that was back in 96.
Yeah.
And it was whoa.
That was the bomb.
Right. I mean, the world was,
That was the thing.
a clone. You can clone things.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was really what put cloning on the map
Yeah.
for a lot of people.
Okay.
But then fast forward, a couple decades.
Okay.
And now we're seeing this technology being applied to pets.
So it's cats and dogs.
Yes.
What-
Dogs,
Horse-
horses even.
Yeah, horses. Whoa.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
Okay, so we've got Dolly way back when.
Right.
Now we're talking cats and dogs.
Yeah.
So
Where do we go from there?
Yeah.
Well, I think we have to start with those personal stories.
Okay.
Because those really get to the heart of why people are choosing to clone.
Okay.
And we've got this TLC show. I don't know if you've heard of this one.
Okay.
But it's about this woman, Danielle.
Okay.
And Danielle...
I love a good personal story.
Oh, they're so powerful.
Yeah.
And they really give you a window into why people would consider this,
All
right? So Danielle lost her dog, Trouble.
Mm.
And years later,
Ah.
she still, couldn't part with his things. She was still saving, his chicken and his water. She couldn't let go.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for her, the idea of cloning
Yeah.
wasn't about replacing Trouble.
Right.
It was about keeping a part of him alive.
Right. Holding on to that
Yeah.
piece of him.
Exactly. And that's a really common thread we see in a lot of these stories.
Yeah. Okay, so it's this emotional connection.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting how that kind of drives this whole industry.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's not just about the science, it's about the heart.
Okay, so we've got Danielle in Trouble.
Yes.
And that kind of gets at that grief and loss element.
Exactly.
What other stories do we have?
Well, there's Mona.
Okay.
And Mona actually went ahead and cloned her Maltese, Angel.
Whoa.
And named the clone Jelly.
Oh.
And but here's the thing, it cost her $50,000.
$50,000.
$50,000 to clone her dog.
Wow.
And that's a figure that makes a lot of people,
It makes you think.
it makes you think, right?
Yeah.
What would you pay
Yeah.
to potentially have that bond again?
Right. And is it?
And it also
Yeah.
highlights something really important about this technology, which is its accessibility,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, because that's not.
It's not cheap.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not exactly accessible to most people. $50,000.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Right.
Yeah.
So right now,
So is it only
it's really only available to the wealthy.
who can really even consider this?
Exactly.
Wow.
And so it raises all sorts of questions, right?
Mhm.
About who gets to decide.
Right.
Who gets to have.
Yeah, is this
Has to
kind of
be-
technology a luxury?
It is a luxury.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
At least for now.
So we've got
It is for now.
grief.
Yeah.
We've got the cost factor.
And I think it's not always just about grief, right? Sometimes it's about a deep gratitude for an animal that might have saved your life.
Okay, so a hero dog.
Exactly, like a hero dog.
Yeah.
And we have a great example of that with the Shearharts.
Okay.
The Shearharts had this dog, Marley, and Marley was a yellow lab, known for being loyal and protective.
Yeah.
And he really lived up to that reputation.
How so?
So they were out hiking miles from help.
Okay.
And the wife, she was pregnant with her first child.
Oh, wow.
And a rattlesnake appeared.
Oh, no.
Right. And Marley, without hesitation, jumped in front of her.
Oh, my God.
Then got bit by the rattlesnake.
Wow.
He saved her life.
Wow. So he's like a true hero.
A true hero.
Yeah.
And so for them,
Yeah.
the decision to clone was very much driven by this sense of like, we have to preserve this dog's legacy.
Wow.
He was so special. He was so unique.
Right.
He had this incredible temperament.
Yeah.
He saved their lives.
Right. And I would imagine like
Yeah.
dogs especially form such a close bond with families.
That's
And
right.
when you have like a life or death situation like that, it just amplifies everything.
It deepens that bond even further.
That's right. That's right.
And so for them, cloning was a way to like honor that bond.
Wow. So it's almost like trying to recreate that magic.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah. That
It's a
is-
really, it's a
yeah.
really fascinating aspect of this.
Right.
Like, what is it about these animals
Yeah.
that makes us want to like replicate them?
Right. And is it possible to replicate them? That's the other question. Right.
Exactly.
Because you can clone the DNA.
Right.
But is it really the same animal?
Right. That's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
And I think, we have to.
That's a whole other deep dive.
Yes, absolutely. We have
Yeah.
to delve into the science a little bit to understand that.
Okay.
So we've talked about the emotional side of it.
Yeah.
Like the grief,
Mm-hmm.
the gratitude, the bond,
Mm-hmm.
the desire to kind of like recreate something special.
Yeah.
But what about like the financial side of this? Because
Yeah.
you said $50,000.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
Six.
It's not cheap.
Not cheap.
And the thing is, not everybody has $50,000 just lying around. Right? Like, what if you're like me and you
Right.
love your cat,
Exactly.
but you don't have 50 grand
Exactly.
to shell out? Like,
So what are your options?
yeah, what are my options?
Well, there is a more affordable option
Okay.
called genetic preservation.
Genetic preservation. Okay.
Yeah, and it's a mouthful.
Okay.
But basically,
Break it down for me.
it's like freezing your pet's DNA in time.
Okay.
So you're not cloning them right away.
Got it.
You're just taking a little sample, usually done by a vet,
Okay.
and they send it off to a company,
Okay.
and that company stores it for you.
And how much does that cost?
So that's the good news.
Okay.
It's significantly cheaper than cloning.
Okay.
We're talking about
We need the numbers.
around $1,600 up front,
Okay.
and then about $150 a year for storage.
Okay. So it's like an annual fee.
It's like an annual fee, yeah, to keep that possibility open.
A possibility open. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So it's like an insurance policy
It is.
on the future.
It's like an insurance policy
Snapchat?
on your pet's DNA.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. I like
So it gives you that option down the road.
it. Okay.
If you decide, I really want to explore this cloning thing,
Okay.
but you don't have to make that big financial commitment right away.
Okay. So that makes it a little bit more accessible
Exactly.
to the average person.
It makes it more accessible, and it gives you time to think about
All
it,
right. Right.
right? Because it's a big decision.
Yeah. It's not just
It's not like buying a goldfish.
Right. Exactly. It's not a goldfish.
Right.
Yeah. So
Well, you have some time to really weigh the pros and cons.
okay. But let's say like money is no object.
Okay.
I do this genetic preservation thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then whatever, 5-10 years down the line,
Yeah.
my cat, Mittens, who I love dearly,
Yes.
passes away.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like devastated,
Of course.
heartbroken. And I'm like, you know what?
Hmm?
I'm gonna clone Mittens.
Okay.
Will that cat be Mittens?
That is the $1 million question,
Right.
right? And it's one that scientists are still trying to unravel.
Yeah, because she's quirky.
Okay.
Mittens, she's got her own personality.
So you're saying, like,
Yeah.
will a clone have the same personality?
Yeah. Will it have the same personality?
That's the question.
Right.
And it's a really important one.
Yeah.
Think of it this way.
Yep.
Cloning is like
Yeah.
creating a delayed identical twin.
Okay.
Right.
A delayed identical twin.
Okay. A delayed identical twin. Okay.
Yeah. So if you think about
Yeah.
human twins, identical twins,
Right.
they share the same DNA,
Right.
but they're not carbon copies of each other.
Right.
Right.
They're still individuals.
They're still individuals. They
Yeah.
have their own personalities, their
Yeah.
own quirks, their own experiences.
Okay.
Right. And it's the same with cloned pets.
So you're saying.
While they share the same genetic blueprint,
Yeah.
their personalities are influenced by a whole bunch of factors.
So it's not a guarantee?
It's not a guarantee that
Yeah.
if I clone Mittens,
Right.
I'm going to get Mittens back.
Exactly. You might get a cat
Okay.
that looks just like Mittens,
Right.
but has a completely different personality.
Okay. So it's like,
And that's important for people to understand going
It's just-
into this.
I'm playing the lottery a little bit.
In a way, yeah, you're playing
Yeah.
the genetic lottery.
Okay. So it's not a sure thing.
It's not a sure thing at all.
All right.
And we actually have a really good example of this with
Fantastic.
Kelly and her cat, Chai.
Oh, okay.
So Kelly had this cat, Chai,
Mm-hmm.
and Chai was like her best friend.
Oh,
They were inseparable.
yeah.
And sadly, Chai passed away,
Oh.
and Kelly was devastated.
Ah,
So she decided to clone Chai,
okay.
and she named the clone Belle.
Okay.
And Belle looks strikingly similar to Chai,
Okay.
like almost identical,
Wow.
but their personalities are completely different.
Wow, so it's like the nature versus nurture
very-
debate playing out
It's the perfect example of that.
in real life.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So it really highlights the fact that even though you're replicating the DNA,
Yeah.
you're not replicating all of the experiences,
Right.
all of the environmental factors
Right.
that shape who an animal becomes.
That's like taking
And it's like
taking a human.
it is like taking a human
from
and putting
Spain.
them in a completely different environment.
Right, exactly.
Right. They might look the same,
Yeah.
but their personality would be totally different.
Okay, so it's like even if you could
Right.
replicate like the physical
Yeah.
characteristics,
hmm
you can't replicate the soul.
You can't replicate the soul. That's a really important distinction.
Okay.
And I think it's something that gets lost sometimes
Yeah.
in all the excitement around pet cloning.
Right.
That's
Not
like-
as simple as it seems.
It's not a copy-paste.
Right.
It's much more complicated than that.
Okay.
And I think that's what makes it so fascinating, is that it raises all these questions about identity,
Right.
about what makes us who we are,
Right. What makes us us?
what makes us us exactly.
Right.
And in this case, what makes our pets who they are.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit more.
Okay.
Because
Where do you want to go?
we keep saying cloning.
Right.
But like most people
How does it actually work?
don't actually know how it works.
How does it actually work?
Right. So like
It seems like magic, right?
it seems like magic, right?
You're telling me I can take like a few cells from my dog
Yeah.
and create a whole new being.
Yeah, like how does that even work?
So it starts with a small tissue sample,
Okay.
usually collected by a vet.
Okay.
And this sample contains the pet's DNA,
Okay.
right? And the DNA is really like the instruction manual
Okay.
that makes your pet unique.
Got it.
Okay.
So it's like the blueprint.
It's the blueprint, exactly.
Okay.
And so this sample is then sent off to a company that specializes in pet cloning.
Okay. Is there like one main company?
Well, there are a few,
Okay.
but one of the biggest names you'll hear is Viagen Pets.
Vivo. Okay.
Viagen Pets,
Yeah.
and they're based in Texas.
Okay.
And they've become kind of like the big player.
They're like the big dog
They're the big dog.
in the pet cloning world.
Exactly.
Viagen pet.
That's okay. And what's interesting is they didn't actually start out cloning pets.
Oh, really?
No, they actually started out cloning livestock.
Okay, so they've been in the cloning game
They've been in the cloning game for a while.
for a while.
They were cloning like cattle and horses.
Okay, so they had the technology.
They had the technology.
And then, like,
And then they realized,
wait a minute.
hey, there's this whole market.
People love their pets.
People love their pets.
Right.
And they're willing to pay.
And they'll pay anything.
Right.
Right.
And so they kind of like tapped into this.
It's fascinating.
They tapped into this whole new market.
Right.
Driven by, that emotional connection
Right.
that we have with our pets.
The human-animal bond.
Exactly.
I think.
So yeah, Viagen Pets, they're kind of the big player.
Okay, so I send Mitten's DNA
So you send a little sample
to Viagen Pets.
to Viagen Pets
It's in Texas.
in Texas.
Okay.
And they take that sample
What do they do with it?
and they culture the cells from that sample
Okay.
and they freeze them.
Okay, and how long can they freeze?
They can freeze those cells indefinitely. Indefinitely.
Yeah.
So it's like pressing pause
That's crazy.
on the possibility of a clone.
Wow. Okay, so it's like a,
So those cells are just waiting there
yeah,
for whenever you're ready.
it's like a frozen
It is like a frozen
time capsule.
time capsule of your pet's DNA.
Okay. And then let's say I'm ready.
Okay.
How do we go from
Sounds good.
frozen cells to
Yeah.
living, breathing animal?
So this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
And it actually mirrors in vitro fertilization, or IVF, in humans.
Okay, I've heard of that.
You've heard of that, right?
Yeah.
So they take an egg
Okay.
from a donor dog
Okay.
and they remove its nucleus.
Okay.
And the nucleus is basically like the part that contains
Okay.
the donor dog's DNA.
Okay, so they're taking out
They're taking out
the donor dog's
the
DNA.
donor dog's DNA,
Oh,
exactly.
got it.
And then they take one of those frozen cells from your pet
Okay.
that carries its unique DNA
Okay.
and they insert it into that emptied egg.
Wow. So it's like a little
It's like a cellular switcheroo.
cellular switcheroo.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
They're basically taking,
So they're like replacing
they're
the
replacing
donor dog's DNA
the donor dog's genetic material
with my pet's
of the pet being cloned.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then what?
And then just like with IVF, that egg
Yeah.
now carrying the original pet's DNA blueprint
Okay.
is implanted into a surrogate mother dog.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So there's a surrogate involved
There is a surrogate mother dog involved.
in this whole process.
Yes, and that's actually where a lot of the ethical considerations come in.
Right.
Because now you're involving another animal
Yeah. It's not just
in this whole process.
It's a cloned animal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's something that,
It's like, where do we draw the line?
exactly. It's like, where do we draw the line?
Yeah.
And how do we ensure
Right.
that all animals involved are being treated ethically?
Right. And I would imagine there's a lot of different opinions on that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different opinions on that.
So it's not as simple as...
And it's a really important conversation to have.
Right.
Because, we don't want to exploit animals
Right.
in the name of,
Yeah. We don't want to create
science or progress or...
more problems
Right.
in trying to solve this one problem.
Right, exactly.
Grief and loss.
We want to make sure that we're doing it
Right.
in a way that's ethical and responsible.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like
So it's a complex issue.
it's a very multifaceted issue
Issue.
with a lot of
A
different
lot of different viewpoints.
viewpoints to consider.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that's what makes it so interesting to
All right.
talk about,
So it's not just about...
because it's not black and white.
Right.
The science.
It's not just about the science.
It's about the ethics.
It's about the ethics.
It's about the emotions.
the emotions, about
Like
like
financial implications.
the money,
Right.
like it's all intertwined.
It's all interconnected.
Yeah.
And I think as we delve deeper into these stories,
Yeah.
you'll see how all of these threads
Yeah.
kind of weave together.
Like a big tapestry.
It is. It's
Yes.
a tapestry of
Yeah.
science and ethics and...
How do we even start to untangle all of this?
Well, I think a good place to start is by hearing from the people who have actually gone through this process.
Okay, so let's hear some
Let's hear from the pet owners
personal stories.
who have cloned their pets.
Okay. Okay, so let's get into some of these stories because we've got this whole stack of them here.
Yes.
What's like the most like kind of mind-blowing one?
Well, so there's this woman, Courtney,
Okay.
and she cloned her dog, Willow,
Okay.
after Willow was hit by a car.
Ah.
And, it was a really, really difficult time for her, obviously.
Yeah.
And she had heard about pet cloning and thought, you know what, I have to try this. I have to see if this is possible.
So she like threw her hat in the ring.
She did.
Wow.
She sent in the genetic material
Okay.
and went through the whole process.
And how long did it take from like
Well, that's the thing.
sending in the DNA to
It took 4 years.
4 years?
4 years
Wow.
for the clone to be born.
So it's not like an overnight.
No, it is a long process.
Wow. Okay.
A lot of waiting.
Okay, so 4 years later,
4 years later.
a clone of Willow is born.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
There wasn't just one puppy.
Okay.
9 puppies were born.
9.
9 clones of Willow.
What?
Can you believe that?
That's like a lot of dogs.
It's a lot of dogs.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so what did she do with 9 dogs?
So she kept one,
Okay.
and the others were adopted out to loving homes.
Oh.
But she kept one and named her Phoenix.
Ah. Phoenix. Okay.
And Phoenix is like her pride and joy. And she posts about Phoenix all the time on social media.
Oh, really? So she's like an influencer.
She's become kind of a pet cloning influencer.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a whole other like layer to this whole thing.
It's a whole other...
Because it's like social media is playing a role in like
a huge
how we even view this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we're seeing these stories.
It's like normalizing it almost.
Yeah, it's normalizing it.
Yeah.
And it's giving people a platform to share their stories.
Right.
Both positive and negative.
So it's like a double-edged sword.
It is a double-edged sword, absolutely.
Because on the one hand, it's like you're getting more information out there.
You're raising awareness.
You're raising awareness.
You're connecting people who might be going through similar experiences.
Right, exactly.
But then there's also that risk of...
But then there's also the risk of...
kind of glamorizing
glamorizing it.
or making it seem
Yeah.
easier than it actually is, or more
Yeah.
accessible.
Right. And I did see that this particular influencer,
Yeah.
Courtney, she got a lot of
Exactly.
backlash.
She got a lot of negativity.
For her decision.
People were very angry with her.
Wow.
Boy, accusing her of playing God.
Oh, wow.
Saying that she was...
So it brings up all those like...
all those ethical
considerations. Questions.
Yeah, right.
Because if we can do something,
Right.
should we?
Exactly the question. And there's no easy answer.
Right.
And it's something that I think as a society we're still grappling with.
Right. And especially when it comes to animals who can't speak for themselves.
Exactly. They don't have a voice in this conversation.
Yeah, it's our responsibility to
It is.
be looking out for.
Absolutely, to be their voice.
Their well-being.
Exactly. And so it's a really...
That's a lot of pressure.
It is a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And it's a huge responsibility.
It's a huge responsibility.
And it's not something to be taken lightly.
So are there, like, regulations around this? Like, is it...
a great question.
Like the Wild West, can anybody just, like,
right.
clone whatever they want?
So it varies from country to country.
Okay.
For example, in the UK, cloning animals for non-scientific purposes.
Okay.
Like pet cloning is actually banned.
It's banned?
It's banned.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting because you have these laws in place.
Right.
But technology doesn't always follow borders.
Okay. Right, it's a global world.
It's a global world.
Yeah.
And so we found this really interesting story about a British couple who cloned their beloved dachshund.
Aw.
Dylan. And they were heartbroken when Dylan passed away. And they were like, we have to clone him.
Oh.
But they lived in the UK, where it's banned.
So what did they do?
So they found a company in South Korea called Zoom Biotech that was willing to do it.
Wow. So
They sent Dylan's DNA samples.
They found a loophole?
They found a loophole.
Wow.
They sent Dylan's DNA samples to South Korea.
Wow.
And that's where the cloning process took place.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, so even though it's like...
So even with these bans?
Banned in some places, people are like finding ways to...
People are finding ways to do it. Because the demand is there. The desire is there.
The desire is there, and people love their pets.
And they're willing to go to great lengths.
To keep that bond alive.
To keep that bond alive, exactly.
Oh, no. And so how much did this cost them?
This one was a little bit cheaper than the dog.
Okay.
This one was $25,000.
$25,000. Okay.
Still not cheap.
Still not cheap, but like...
But for some people,
it's
like, it's worth every penny.
Yeah.
If it means potentially having that bond again.
Recreating that connection.
It's a very personal decision.
Okay, so we've got people.
Right. Going to these lengths, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like traveling across the world to get this done.
Right. And it really makes you think, like, is it?
Yeah.
Is it worth it? Like, is it...
Right.
Is it everything they hoped for?
Right. Like, do these cloned animals actually live up to the memory to the original pet?
Yeah. And it's like, how would we even know? Like, we can't ask the animals.
Well, exactly. It's not like they can tell.
It's all kind of like subjective.
It's all based on the observations of the owners.
Right.
Right. And so it's a very strange gray area.
Yeah, gray area.
Yeah, and it kind of makes me think about like
Yeah.
This whole nature versus nurture thing.
Yeah.
Because, like I said before, like Mittens is quirky. She's got her own thing.
Exactly.
If I were to clone Mittens, would I want her to be exactly the same?
It's the question, right?
Or would I want her to be her own individual?
Right. Do you want a carbon copy?
Right.
Or do you want something new?
Where's that line?
Right.
And it's like you were saying, you know.
And I think for some people, they do want that carbon copy.
They want that carbon copy.
But they want that exact replica.
Right. But even then, it's not.
But as we've seen, it's impossible to recreate all of those environmental factors. Right. Because even if you have the same DNA, you know,
those experiences shape who we are.
Right.
They shape who our animals are.
Right. Exactly.
And so there's always going to be that element of the unknown with cloning.
Right. And I think that's what makes it both.
And I think that's what makes it
exciting and terrifying.
Both exciting and terrifying.
Right.
Because you're kind of.
Because you're rolling the dice.
You're rolling the dice.
And a little bit.
You're playing with nature in a way.
And is that.
And that's a line that we're comfortable crossing.
Right. Should we even be doing this?
Right. Exactly.
And I don't think there's an easy answer to that.
And I don't think there is an easy answer.
Yeah.
I think it's something that we're going to.
Right. This is like a.
Continue to debate.
A deep philosophical conversation.
And we could probably do a whole other deep dive just on that.
We could talk about this for hours.
Right. And still not come to a definitive answer.
And still not have an answer.
Right. Yeah. Because it's so complex.
Yeah. And it really makes you think about like
it does.
Our relationship with animals and how far we're willing to go.
Are we willing to go?
To keep them in our lives.
To cheat death.
Right.
To hold on to them.
Like.
A little bit longer.
Are we playing God in a way?
Are we playing God?
I don't know.
It's a question I don't think we have the answer to.
But it's something that we need to be talking about.
We need to be talking about it.
Yeah.
We need to be thinking about it.
And I think
because it's not going away.
It's only going to become more...
It's only going to become...
prevalent.
More prevalent.
Right. As the technology advances.
As the technology advances.
It's going to become more affordable.
It's going to become more accessible.
More accessible.
And more people are going to be faced with this decision.
So for all of you listening out there...
Yes.
Think about it.
Think about it, yeah.
If cost and ethics weren't a factor...
Would you clone your pet?
Would you clone your pet?
It's a big question. It's a big question.
But it's one worth considering.
It is one worth considering.
All right, well, on that note, we're going to wrap things up.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fascinating.
This has been amazing, as always. Thanks for coming on.
Of course.
And to all of our listeners out there, keep those tails wagging.
Keep those tails wagging.
Keep those purrs rumbling.
Those purrs rumbling.
And keep those minds curious.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time.
Artificial Frontier Podcast.